So welcome everyone to this talk this morning through Business Club. Our special guest Brian Tohana is our speaker today. So Brian loves eating perfectly ripe avocados, playing squash, slacklining, and coaching high performers. He believes our strength is in our difference and teaches what he calls applied empathy to help couples and teams connect across differences and leverage the power of their diversity. He's fascinated by psychological safety and conscious communication as a foundation for getting the most out of all our relationships from the boardroom to the bedroom. So please welcome Brian Tohana.
Hello, all right, thanks Paul. And thanks everyone for being here. I'm excited to get to share with you today. Can everyone see my shared screen?
Yes.
Nice, okay, great. Okay, so I wanted to take this 20 minutes today to really explore how we can be of service with our presence and cultivate depth and listening. So this is a super short breakdown of my half-day and full-day workshop. So I hope I've tailored this to what will be most beneficial to you all today. And I'll get into what applied empathy is versus, traditional empathy and how I distinguish that. And I guess a lot of people know what empathy is, but what I'm exploring today with you is what does it sound like in practice? How do we do empathy, right? That's a really important distinction because basically, until you can demonstrate that you understand someone, even if you understand them, it's kind of like it doesn't really matter. We can leave people feeling unseen, unheard, and unvalued. So that's what we're going to explore today. All right. So just a quick framework for change as we move along here. Has anyone seen Tony Robbins' Success Cycle before? No? Okay, cool. That's great. So there are 4 parts. We've got a belief or our approach or our worldview, which determines the potential we access. We take an action, which is oftentimes habitual based on that belief, which generates a result. And the result is also evidence that reinforces what we believe. So if you think they're not going to get it, whether you're talking to a client, whether you're talking to your partner, you're going to be frustrated. And you're like, maybe if I take a different action, that will change the result. But if the belief doesn't change, you continue to get the same results, which is why a lot of us spin our wheels, right? So a lot of us just try the same thing over and over again. Some of us try a different action, but even if you take 100 different actions with the same belief, you're going to get the same result. So what this little workshop, and my larger one focuses on is both. So you have to change your belief, your approach, your worldview, and your actions. The actions are the tools, the communication tools, and then you need a new understanding as well to generate an actual new result. So we focus on both. And if you've got any quick questions as we move along, just unmute yourself and chime in. So I wanted to set the foundation as well today for just levels of listening, so we can just be aware of what you're listening for as we move along. And this is really at the basis of what allows me to coach high performers, executives. I'm only 31, but it's what am I listening for, right? That matters the most. And then how am I responding? It's not about knowing better than anyone. It's about the quality of our presence and how we're being with another person. So I love this quote for kind of setting the stage for listening. It's by one of, it's called the Circling Institute. I believe the deepest way you can love somebody is to be willing to fully go on their ride, to listen to them so deeply that through your listening, they gain a deeper insight into their own experience. And we're going to dive more into kind of what that means and how to do that as we move along. So what are you listening for? Well, the first stage is ignoring or pretending. We do the smile and nod. You're kind of listening, but you're not really fully present. And that's for various different reasons. Maybe you're just listening too much to your mind. Maybe your capacity today, you're just tired. So you're doing the best that you can, right? Second, it's selective or judgmental listening. So what that is, we're listening within our own frame of reference. What does this have to do with me? Notice that that's happening automatically, right? And none of these are bad or wrong. It's just we're moving to create a greater sense of awareness so that you can choose, how do I want to be listening? It's totally up to you. It's not that these are bad ways of listening necessarily. So listening until it hits a trigger. You might listen until you disagree, right? Oh, Brian said something I disagree with. Now I'm just going to tune him out. I make some conclusion about him or something. I disagree. Okay, we kind of like throw out the baby with the bathwater. Listening to confirm our judgments or beliefs, to be like, see, I knew he was this, or I knew it was that, and notice that this is all going to happen default, unconsciously, automatically, oftentimes. So your job as a listener is just to be aware of what's happening for you so that you can choose to be present again. Remember, we're cultivating depth here. We oftentimes listen for just solutions. So a big part of what I wanted to share today and how we can apply it in these times, kind of like specifically, is we can jump into that problem solving mode, right? That fixing mode, which again isn't necessarily bad, but when we're in that fixer, helper, rescuer mode, we oftentimes disempower the victim to find their own solutions. And we oftentimes treat people kind of more like a machine that needs fixing rather than a complex human being that maybe I don't understand what's best for them. So just noticing when we're listening for solutions. And listening for content and information and facts versus what's underneath all of that. What really matters to this person? And that's what we're going to get into in the next one. And then most commonly, listening for my turn, right? Oh, he's done, and now I'm going to say something. So there's this great distinction. Distinctions are really powerful in helping us gain awareness to choose one thing over another. And there's an interesting distinction called interested versus interesting. So oftentimes in conversation, we'll say something interesting because we're listening for our turn. They're done, and now I'm going to say something interesting about what they said, or maybe completely just my own thing. Maybe it's not even that related. But that's when we get two people talking at each other, listening for their turn, saying something interesting versus intentionally keeping the attention on the other person and being interested. And that's where we keep the attention on them intentionally. So number 3, listening to understand, or empathic listening. So we're hearing what they say and what they don't say, which is just as important. Someone could be telling a story that really matters to them. Like I noticed they told a story about everyone in their family except their dad. What's that about? I'm curious. Hearing the thoughts, concerns, and assumptions underneath their words. Wow, like underneath all of this, I really get that Brian seems to care about being heard. That could be something that you notice. I wonder what in his history has created this in him. That could be something that you're listening for. You're feeling emotions and nonverbal cues. So, you're noticing, oh, like even without hearing my words, you'd be seeing my actions and like, oh, there's some energy here. He seems to be passionate or something about that, right? We're curious about hearing the context, understanding where they're coming from. So a really great simple example of this is I was brainstorming with these 2 teammates of mine, and we all got triggered in our own ways. And we had some debrief conversations afterwards. And the woman, Julia, I got to hear how her dad didn't hear her in childhood. And so in order for her to be heard, she had to say things like 100 different ways from all these different angles, which triggered me because I was just being crazy overloaded, even though I already validated what she said. And so hearing the context of what created her behavior helped me have compassion for her. I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Thanks for sharing that. Now I totally get you. We're also listening within their frame of reference. So what's it like to be the person I'm listening to? What's it like to actually be them right now? Why are they sharing what they're sharing? Active listening, a lot of us know this, it's showing that you're listening. So you're making sure you're making eye contact in the way that you're responding with your body language, nodding along. And then listening for the chief concern versus the chief complaint. So again, are we problem focused or are we outcome focused? What is really important to this person versus just getting kind of sucked into that problem? And then lastly, listening to learn, or what we call generative dialogue, where we leverage the power of our difference to create something new together. And generative dialogue is that feeling you get almost of synergy of like, oh, there's something melding here where we're coming to a higher place that we couldn't alone. But we each need to be willing to kind of pitch our idea, stand in our truth fully, and be open to being malleable at the same time, right? And that's an interesting balance. How do I bring all of myself in a partnership or in a group of people and still be like, cool, what am I not seeing here at the same time? So in a pair, what does the feeling I'm having have to do with the person I'm listening to? So what this is a really interesting question, because it's acknowledging that there are two people in the relationship and that I'm being impacted by what they're saying. So I'm having a feeling and it has to do with what they're saying, and I'm acknowledging that within myself. So listening is vulnerable, because are you willing to be affected and changed as a result of what that other person is saying? That's the deepest form of listening as far as I can tell. I'm actually open, and that's where we're holding our ideas and worldview that we tend to get defensive about, right? We go to world wars because we're so identified with our thoughts. So are we willing to be changed and affected by what the other person says? Any questions so far? All good? Okay, so normally this is an experiential workshop, but today we're only going to get to go into the theory, because I get you to practice all of the tools in partnership, so you get to have an experience of it. But there are two main components to empathy. So the first is the internal process, which is I'm taking their perspective. I'm asking myself, what's it like to be that person? So I'm understanding, this is a really important distinction, as the other person versus about them. And I'll give you an example. When I get someone to, so I'll use a actual real example. I was coaching, I think he was 19-year-old, and he had hung up the phone on his mom. And that created an argument. And both of them, I could hear, could basically understand where the other person was coming from, right? But so I asked him, like, how do you think that felt for your mom? He's like, not good. Okay, well, describe not good to me. And I get him to speak as the other person. So if I'm my mom and I'm him, so I'm going to play both roles. I'm him pretending I'm my mom. Okay, so my son hung up the phone on me. I feel, and it was like, he said ignored. I was like, okay, great. That's one level deeper. And how does ignored feel? And then all of a sudden he went silent. Tears came to his eyes and he felt the pain. He felt the hurt of like, oh my gosh, I was hurt by someone I really love. And we just paused there and I said, what's happening right now? He's like, I get it. I'm going to call my mom. So when you actually do perspective taking right, when you really are able to speak as them, that's been the unlock for people in creating a connection. There are two main components of empathy: the cognitive aspect, which is thinking how they think, and the emotional aspect, which is feeling how they feel. The second component of empathy is an external process, which is what I focus on in applied empathy. And what that example really demonstrates is just because you understand the other person, unless you're able to demonstrate it, your understanding basically means nothing. And this is where we can all become masters at communication. And that's when I'm going to get into the tools that we can use to very intentionally hear the other person. So I created my own definition for applied empathy. You can kind of create your own, but this is what I have experienced. So empathy is more of a skill than a trait, number one. So it can be learned, as we can see through that perspective taking process. So I define empathy as the learned ability to respond in a way that demonstrates you understand another person's point of view so completely that their nervous system relaxes because they feel you get it and know they're not alone. And I really wanted to incorporate the physiological aspect of what your words can do in another person's body if you get this right. And it's not about getting it right as in like, oh, I'm doing bad if I don't get that, but just knowing what's possible and getting to experience that yourself, number one, and then also getting to help someone else feel heard is an incredible experience. So the tools that we're going to go through today will be a part of, in that first framework, the action that creates the new result for you. So the way that you respond to someone determines on a spectrum whether they feel understood or alone. And I think even with the best of intentions, we can leave people feeling more unseen, unheard, or alone than we might realize because we're responding in such default automatic ways. So all of this is meant to bring more awareness so that we can be more intentional and respond more consciously. How long have we taken? Okay, so I'm going to skip through these and get into the tools here, just so we can make sure we have enough time. So why don't we feel heard and what creates conflict in the first place is a really simple baseline. We have not defined who's the listener. We have a parallel monologue happening most times. We think we're listening, but we're not. We're listening for our turn, right? So there are two ways to go about this. It's kind of like there's mild and spicy, ways to listen. So if I'm in a conflict, then it's really important to define the listener and to set a timer, because that creates a boundary for safety. So I know as the listener, how long am I in this role? 5 or 10 minutes? And then after that, I'm going to use all the tools that I'm going to move into here. So as the listener, I have safety because I know when my turn is going to be over, and I'm not just going to get bulldozed for an hour. So I can actually give you all of my attention. So this is where psychological safety comes into play. And then for the speaker, I also have a timer for, oh, I get to share without interruption here. And this person's actually going to give me all of their attention. But in a non-conflict situation, you can just be intentional in being like, I remember, again, recently we were sharing ideas in a team and I noticed we started the parallel monologue. So number one is the awareness of like, oh, I can hear a reiteration of this person's point, which means they don't feel heard. That's why they're reiterating it in a different way. Voices also escalate if we're not feeling heard. That's what escalates an argument. We haven't said, okay, I'm going to listen first and intentionally get you. So I had that awareness and I shifted and I just put her first, put my point of view aside, heard her. And then by the end of that, she said, and what were you going to say? And so I got to share my point of view too. So being intentional with your listening and just taking on that role, because you as a leader have to be responsible as the more mature or aware person need to take on that role first. And that's what makes empathy the hardest, especially in conflict, because we all want to be heard. So if you can intentionally take turns, that's the unlock. So a lot of people know the tool of mirroring or reflecting. It's really fun to play around with in your everyday. You can mirror the last 2, 3, 4 words of what someone said, and they will not notice. You can do it over and over and over again, and they will not notice. I was even teaching this to someone, and they did it to me, and I didn't notice. It's fascinating. Try it out. It's amazing. And it's also the best way to eliminate any misunderstanding or argument. The difference between mirroring and distilling or paraphrasing is mirroring is as best you can saying what they said with as little interpretation as possible. Like literally, if you could do word for word, and again, especially in conflict, in day-to-day life though, you'd think people would catch on, but most times they won't. They'll just go deeper. They'll just share more. Like you could say, Brian, they'll just share more, they'll go deeper, and I'll be like, yeah, and then I explain more about that. And then you'd mirror that, and I'd be like, yeah, and there's more, and there's more, and there's more, and there's more. So if you want to get someone talking, just mirror them. And make sure that you're using the language of guessing about what they said. So that's why I have the sentences here. What I think I heard was. And then you're checking, right? Did I miss anything? Because I really want to make sure I understand you. It sounds like what you said was. Is that accurate? Is that true? The best, I have this great story of when I was coaching a couple and I got them to mirror back what each other said. They'd been in a relationship about 20 years and arguing for a massive portion of that. And when they mirrored back, I literally like thought, that's what you think the other person said? It wasn't even close. It was their own interpretation. No wonder you're angry, because you're not being heard at all. You're just making it your own. That's not what they said. You're being triggered because you're using your filter. So mirroring is the power of a simple tool is really incredible. All right. After that, leave space or ask if they have anything that they want to reiterate, add, or clarify. So you've mirrored back. It's like, hey, is there anything else that you want me to get? Is there anything else you want to add? Just leaving them space. It's really great. And then a couple other tools and sentence stems to go along with that. So again, curiosity, we're all curious, right? But using it intentionally as a tool of like, okay, I'm going to be a listener, I'm going to mirror, and I'm going to get curious and clarify what they're saying. So that's the level of intention. And then you combine that with the levels of listening, and you're going to change this with this person. So asking, let's see if I want to hone in on anything here. The question, what else, after someone's done, if you ask what else, I don't know about you, but for me, curiosity is care. It's like offering them to empty the rest of their cup. You know, it's like they think they're done. You say, what else? There's almost always more. And then that question, is there anything else you want me to understand that I didn't get yet? Because you've mirrored back already, right? Is there anything else? So again, you're keeping the attention on them and just, hey, I want to know, how are you really doing during this time right now, right? Questions like, what did you mean by? So then this is really checking assumptions, which is the next tool as well. What did you mean by you're feeling kind of sad right now? Sad means things different to everyone, right? What did you mean by sad? So we're checking for the nuances of what they're saying and not assuming that I just get them, because 100 people could say the same sentence and mean something very different. The language of I'm imagining it's normal for me. I love I'm imagining because it's taking ownership of, I don't know. I'm imagining that you're sad right now. I'm imagining that you're upset about the way that person treated you. Does that fit for you? Does that resonate? I don't know. I think that I know, but I'm checking the conclusions and assumptions that I'm making. And then they can tell me, yeah, not so much sad as like, I'm actually just really angry. And then that's a discovery for them in the moment too. They might not even know until you ask, right? So we're discovering together in the moment. One of the other, sentence stems there is the story I'm making up it's kind of weird to use in everyday conversation, but again, it's fun because it just takes ownership of, I'm making up this story. So it's for your own self-awareness too, because this story is literally just in my head and I cannot know unless I ask. That's the nature of assumptions, right? We really believe that we know, but you don't. So check. Validation. There's this one and one more, and then I think Is that around 20 minutes, Paul? Validation is the most important piece of empathy. So I really want to take time on this one. I call it the secret sauce of empathy. This is where, after you've used all the other tools, if you nail this right, this is what creates the nervous system relaxing. So let me tell you a story to help you understand this one a little bit. Okay, a simple story. I'll make it about myself. I was dating this girl and I talked about my ex-girlfriend, and that hurt her. Just for 5 minutes, I talked about her, and then she got like really triggered and upset. And oftentimes when we trigger someone, our default response is to explain why we didn't mean to. So this is really important. So I'm going to use another example. It's kind of like if I step on your toe accidentally, and then I go, oh, I didn't mean to. Does that take away the pain? No. So explanation is received on the other side as justification, and justification is received as defense, which exacerbates the problem. So this is really key. This is what like so many people do. We unintentionally say a word that we genuinely didn't mean to hurt someone, but we did. And then we obviously want to explain why we didn't mean to. I didn't mean that. But that's automatically invalidating their feelings. So if you can move from explanation and catch yourself to consciously validating them, you can put out the fire of conflict in seconds. So I noticed that with this girlfriend, and I could have said like, hey, like I actually am talking about my ex-girlfriend because it doesn't matter at all. That would have made things worse, right? It doesn't matter. That's why I'm talking about it. It's all good. Like I love you more. It's all cool. That would have made things way worse. But instead I was like, you know what? I can totally understand how, you know, me talking about my ex-girlfriend would seem insensitive. You know, that seems really insensitive actually. And if I were you, I would feel kind of hurt too, because you're talking about your past lover who you were about to marry. And so I would feel insecure and like you're being insensitive too. That makes sense. Fire out. Out. Gone. So keywords are that makes sense, and using the words if I were you, and then this is where you have to get good at the perspective taking of really thinking and feeling what it's like to be them, right? I had to be willing to see myself as insensitive first. But a lot of times our ego bumps up against wanting to acknowledge even that, right? I'm not insensitive. That wasn't me being insensitive, but it's not about me. It's about how she perceived me, which is what's the most important part. And then giving the qualifier of because. Here's the reason why. Because, yeah, we're new in relationship and you're just feeling a little insecure, and there was someone I was deeply in love with, and maybe you're afraid of her still being more important than you. That makes sense? Totally. I'm with you. So that's where we're demonstrating I'm with you. You're not alone. I'm with you. I totally get it. And then if you still really want to share your point of view at the end, you can. Last one. Maybe just, actually, let's just don't read those yet. So last one's called sharing impact. I should hide them in the PowerPoint. Last one's called sharing impact. Sharing impact is this magical gift that you can give someone. In other words, you don't know how the other person's affected by you until you share. This is where you let someone know that they matter and that you see them, you see who they are. So by the end of 5 or 10 or whatever 20 minutes of listening to someone, you could say, sharing impact is also distilling the essence of what they said and who they are as a person. So I'll give you an example. What I really get about you, Brian, is you really care about helping people feel seen. What I really get about you, Brian, is, or what I really get about, let's see, it can be completely unsaid. So let's say someone tells you a story of their how they love pizza. But what you really get about them is that their heritage from their Italian roots is like living in them in this really profound way. They never said anything about that, but you're just like, whoa, you are so connected to your family and expressing, you know, your Italian heritage through pizza. Like, I don't know. I'm just giving you a funny example, but it's really focusing on what's unsaid as well and how you were personally affected. This is where you let them know they matter to you. Your existence, just by you existing, is incredible, and you have affected me. And when you do that right, their nervous system relaxes, and we feel like, oh my gosh, there's a reason for me being here. And it's called feeling connected to you, the other human being right in front of me. All right, so that's a really brief snippet of super juicy stuff that I love sharing with people. So if you got any questions now or later, I'm very happy to dive in with anyone individually and how you can apply this in specific situations in your life as well. I love just getting to learn more about how we can improve the quality and depth of all of our relationships. So thank you for listening.
Well, thank you, Brian.